from my kitchen. All right, wearing a Driller soccer sweatshirt. Girls Driller soccer. It was like 2007, 2008. It was one of the first BHS items that I ever owned from back in the day when I first started teaching at BHS. This is the third installment for Unit 3. I think this is going to be the last installment. It might be a little longer than the other two, but I think we can get our way all the way through the end of the unit here in one last fail swoop. So let's get at it, ladies and gentlemen. In case you missed it, where are we? We are on the page that starts talking about Rococo art and also the neoclassical. About halfway down the page, we left off talking about the roles of women in the salons, and we're going to pick up there with the Rococo. That's the sound of my dryer going off. That's pretty loud. I wonder if that's going to come out in the video. I'm half tempted to stop, but too legit to quit. We'll just keep going. All right. How did the Rococo artwork differ from the Baroque? The Baroque is a pretty dark, deeply religious type of art that's meant to draw out the religious fervor of the people. In other words, it uses these bold colors, sometimes kind of yellowish, greenish, lots of shadow and intrigue and flow. It's meant to be very busy. It's meant to be very serious art. Now the Rococo, even the name of it, Rococo, is kind of lighthearted and fun. It's really the art of the nobility during the time period, and it's noted for its carefree nature, right? The swing was the piece that we looked at, where the girl's on the swing and she's flicking her shoe in the air and the guy is kind of perving it up, sitting in the bushes, and yeah. That's the piece. After that, the neoclassical art really takes a huge swing back towards the Renaissance style. We're abandoning the ways of both the Baroque and the Rococo and going back to a real close inspection of detail, trying to make things as they genuinely appear, something that the Rococo and the Baroque had gotten away from. So neoclassical art is serious art. It generally carries some sort of purpose and some sort of moral lesson, and generally it has to do something to do with service, discipline, your general sacrifice towards the state. That's where we're going to see of it. The most famous practitioner of the Rococo would have been Watteau, W-A-T-T-E-A-O, and the most famous practitioner of the neoclassical was Jacques-Louis David, okay, or Jacques-Louis David, as it looks like on paper. Following down the list here, the enlightened absolutists. Enlightened absolutism is this bizarre combination of enlightened ideals adopted by absolutist rulers, generally in Eastern Europe, where there's an attempt to try and make governing more efficient and more streamlined, but in the long run, what it really looks like is just trying to make yourself look a little more enlightened for your pen pal friends living in Western Europe. We're going to start with Frederick II, the Great. It says the Great Elector. It shouldn't. It should just say the Great. So scratch out where it says Elector. Frederick the Great was considered to be a very enlightened individual. He tolerated different religions. He introduced a new law code. He made for a wonderful civil service. But at the same time, he also eliminated a meritocracy that his father, Frederick the Soldier King, had introduced, and in that way wasn't as enlightened as others had hoped. He spent a lot of time with Voltaire, and in the long run, like most enlightened absolutists, perhaps there's more absolutism there than enlightenment. Joseph II's the real gunslinger of the bunch. Joseph II introduces thousands of reforms. He frees the serfs. He gets rid of any kind of mercantilistic economics. He completely buys the Enlightenment ideals to the T, right? A complete equality in the society, one big law code, streamlined society, and it's a flop. So that at the end of his life, when Joseph dies, most of his reforms were reversed. It's very unfortunate, but some places like Austria just not ready for that kind of full-on, hard reform. Catherine the Great had promised a lot of reform, promised that there was going to be a new law code. She tolerated religion. She dabbled in Enlightenment absolutism. And then there was a big incident called the Pugachev Rebellion, which convinced Catherine that Russia wasn't ready for any more of that, and so she backed off. Were enlightened absolutists more enlightened or more absolutist? They seem to be more absolutist than enlightened. There are some enlightened ideas sprinkled in there, but frankly, Eastern Europe is behind Western Europe, and the Enlightenment ideas are really created to model Western Europe, so it seems an odd fit. It doesn't seem like it's the right place for the Enlightenment ideals. We should have those in France and in England, not in Prussia and Austria. Moving down here, we've got this huge section on 18th century society. 1750 is kind of an artificial date to say that we're stopping things and restarting them. But in 1750, there's a general trend towards a larger European population as the population begins to expand because less people are dying of the plague and of overall disease. So the population's going up. Infant mortality is going down. The incidence of the bubonic plague are also down. Now, there's still going to be some things that will kill you. Typhus, measles, smallpox, the flu, all still around. Warfare was not as bloody, generally speaking, because it wasn't religious. It was political. And without that religious fervor thrown in there, wars tended to be a little bit shorter, and commanders were not willing to risk everything in the world in order to win a war. And there was the dryer again. So, again, I'm wondering if it's showing up in there. It's going to happen every 5 minutes. That'll be my 5-minute markers. Okay, looking down the row here. Marriage and raising a family. On the elite side, marriage is still going to be decided by your parents, and you're probably going to have a little more children or more children in your family than you would on the popular side. Popular side, it's still going to be dominated by nuclear households, just as the elite side would have been. But you're not going to see as many children, a little bit later marriage. We had some discussion in class over wet nursing. That was something that was in vogue with the elite classes early on and then kind of phased out. Obviously, popular culture, you couldn't afford to hire anyone to do that, and it's good food. You're not going to turn it away. Educational opportunities, as you might guess, the elite culture is going to have more of those, especially when it comes to secondary schools and universities. It's rare to find educational opportunities for the lower classes beyond perhaps a basic parochial education, and that would have leaned towards some education for the boys and very maternal or mommy educations for the girls. So the educational opportunities are vastly different there. Flipping the page. Reading preferences. Well, if you're in the elite group, you're sitting around reading your enlightened works and having a great time of it. If, on the other hand, you're with the popular classes, you might be reading some magazines or some newspapers. There's a new thing called chap books, which are kind of shorter chapter books. And those tended to be either like religious legends, or they would be hero stories, or these really salacious kind of Jerry Springer deals. Social life and pastimes. If you're elite, you hang out and you sit in the drawing room and you sip brandy and you say things like, "I declare, Smithers." I don't know why you have a southern accent, but apparently you do. On the right-hand side in the popular class, festivals and carnival would have been huge. A lot of drinking, especially of gin. Gin is the huge new drink of the age. You can get drunk off of gin on very little money, and that's why a lot of poor people preferred it to beer. What did they eat? If you look at the elite culture, they ate a pretty well-rounded diet. They ate some proteins, they ate fish, they ate meat, they ate cheeses, nuts, they had sweets. It was a good diet. On the other hand, the popular culture really going to scrounge by on whatever they can find. You're not going to see any huge amounts of proteins. They would have eaten a lot of starches, a lot of corn, a lot of potatoes, a lot of root vegetables. Those would have been popular as well. Medical options. If you're wealthy, you might be able to get a surgeon or a university-trained physician to take care of you. If you're in the poorer class, it's going to be some sort of apothecary or faith healer, a local person, and really you don't know what you're going to get either way. Neither one of these individuals are Doogie Howser. They're not going to be able to cure you of all of the things because frankly they don't have an understanding of medicine in a modern sense. So I don't know that the difference here would have been vast. You would have wanted to stay out of hospitals, though. Those were pretty good germ pits. Careers and jobs available. If you're living on the left-hand side here in the elite culture, jobs available. The military, the church, big business jobs, those would have been almost exclusively reserved for those families. On the right-hand side, the poorer folks are not going to get those jobs. You're going to live a life of agriculture still. Flipping the page. We've got a section here about war. There's two wars right in the middle of the 18th century that are pivotal. So let's talk about them for a couple of minutes. The War of the Austrian Succession. When Maria Theresa rises to the throne in 1740, her neighbor Frederick the Great takes advantage of the opportunity to attack. Because that's what you do when a girl takes the throne. You figure that you'll attack and she'll say, "I don't know what to do." And the place will fall to pieces. Frederick attacked, and in this case, Frederick is allied with the French against Austria and Great Britain. The piece of land that Frederick takes, Silesia, is not returned at the end of the war, which kind of guarantees us Part 2. And Part 2, the 7 Years' War, which rages from 1756 to 1763, pits a different set of alliances. Here's the huge thing about this one portion of the study guide. If you remember nothing else, the alliances switch. The Austrians and the French, who are traditional foes, become a union. So the Austrians and the French are now on the same side with the Russians, pitted against the Prussians and the British. Why the switch? The Prussians are feared. All three of the countries who ally against Prussia, that is to say France, Russia, and Austria, all fear the growing size of this prototype Prussian state, that it is going to become something of great power, and they are reluctant to allow it to do so. And that's why they gang up against them. Now, England is mostly fighting in the New World. They're trying to win France's North American colonies, which they will. Prussia is trying to hold on to Silesia, which they will. And really, this is the death knell for the French. The French lose all of their American colonies, save for a few spots, as a result of this conflict. They also spend so much money on it. The French are in dire straits now. Now it's not just they have a debt problem. Now they have a debt crisis. It is looming on them. In 20 years, there's going to be a revolution, and it's going to get ugly. What three powers divided Poland and why? Prussia, Austria, and Russia. Why? Because they could. The Polish had such a weak, centralized state, no absolutist government to speak of, that as a result of that, the three powers were able to simply carve it to pieces and take what they wanted. They didn't even have to go through the indignity of fighting a war. Well done. Moving down, the agricultural revolution caused an increase in food production per acre. Why is this possible? Some pretty simple things, like manure on the crops. Kind of gross, but it leads to big pumpkins. Number 2, the seed drill, which buries the seed into the soil. Simple again, but well done. Selective breeding of animals to create these huge animals, which then would have given off more meat. The use of a rotation system. Pardon me. Told me that the battery power was low. The use of a rotation system using certain crops. Like if you're going to plant crop A, then the next year you plant something rich in nitrogen, like alfalfa. Or you come along with legumes like beans and you plant those. And that re-energizes the nitrogen in the soil, and it makes for a much better growing season the next time around. Okay? Banks play a huge role in that they create opportunities to store money, but also to make debt and loans out to governments, and that builds capital and allows businesses to branch out. How does the cottage industry function? So, follow me along here. We start to grow more agricultural product. As we become more efficient in it, and when I say we here, I mean really the English and the Dutch. They're the people doing it first. As we become more efficient, we have less people required in order to do the work on the land. That land is often enclosed or taken over by larger landowners, thus pushing small landowners out of land and also out of a job. What are they going to do? They don't have anywhere to go. The only place they can work is literally within their cottage, within their home. So they begin working within their home, and the hot product of the day is textiles. Cloth, fabric, yarn, thread, whatever you have, that's what we're going to be making. So these people would have worked in their homes in what would have been mini factories, in the sense that they're working on products and putting together a certain amount of it every week and then giving that off to someone who would take it away from them. That process happened until someone wisened up and realized, let's have a huge factory instead of people working in little houses, and we'll make even more money. How large were the largest cities in Europe at the time? About 500,000. If you look at London, that's the largest city as we move into this industrial period. Who lives in the cities? A vast variety of people. Wealth, poverty, people in the middle. But cities are becoming more and more popular because there is a growth in trade. After 1750, we're going to see that continued population growth and also a growth in people who make money off of business and not off of agriculture as much. Hope this is helpful. Hope you have a good night. We went almost to 15 minutes here. I apologize for the length of the video, but I think it's worthwhile. Make sure you watch them all, folks. Do well.